In this world, there exists a kind of creature known as Yoma. They specifically feed on the internal organs of humans. Not only do they possess formidable combat abilities, but they also possess intelligence and cunning far beyond that of humans. Each time they devour a human, they gain that person's memories and can subsequently transform into a human, hiding among them. Amidst this, several young girls suddenly appear, engaging in battles with the Yoma. They wield a weapon called a Claymore, and thus people refer to them as Claymore. One day, the village is suddenly plagued by Yoma, and 6 villagers meet an unfortunate fate. Fear and suspicion grip the hearts of the villagers, with some even suspecting each other to be Yoma. In order to save the village from peril, the village chief decides to hire the Claymore organization to eliminate the Yoma. However, this decision is facing opposition. Because Claymore are half-human, half-Yoma beings, there is a concern that they, too, may become consumed by their demonic nature and kill everyone. However, when the Claymore arrive the next day, they discover that the half-human, half-Yoma Claymore is a beautiful young girl. Yet, her pupils bear an eerie silver color. It is said that the Claymore's eyes turn golden when they engage in battles with the Yoma. The arrival of the Claymore does not garner a warm welcome from the villagers. Only Riki, a young boy from the village, follows her. In his first encounter with Claymore, he is unaware of her terrifying nature. The girl was intrigued by this human who wasn't afraid of her. During their conversation, Riki learns that the girl's name is Claire, and Claymore is merely a general term used by people to refer to them. Riki, more than anyone else, yearns for Claire to eliminate the Yoma, because the first victims of the Yoma's attack in the village were his parents. He and his brother survived by hiding. When Riki regains consciousness, the Yoma has vanished without a trace. Currently, they are staying in the home of a villager. When mealtime arrives, Riki bids farewell to Claire, intending to return home. However, what awaits him at home is a scene akin to hell. Uncle and auntie were close to death, and the Yoma, savoring a delicious meal, turns out to be none other than his own surviving older brother. It turns out that on the night of the Yoma's attack on the village, his brother was also devoured by the Yoma. Subsequently, the Yoma assumed his brother's appearance and infiltrated the village. Every day, he randomly selects a fortunate victim to be his meal. Little did he expect that the village chief would hire a Claymore. The Yoma plans to have one final feast before fleeing. He strikes Riki down with a punch and prepares to devour him. Claire arrives just in time at a critical moment. It turns out that when she first met Riki, she sensed a strong aura of a Yoma around him. She suspected that the Yoma was close to Riki, so she secretly followed him here. Without hesitation, Claire unleashes her Yoma power once again, and swiftly decapitates the Yoma. Riki finally realized how powerful Claymore was. Although they appear to be human girls, but they are more powerful than Yoma. After eliminating the Yoma, Claire immediately leaves the village. However, Riki is driven out of the village by the frightened villagers who believe he may be a hidden Yoma like his brother. With nowhere to go, Riki wanders desperately and eventually collapses in the desert. When he regains consciousness, he finds himself in another city. It turns out Claire discovered the unconscious Riki and brought him to the town for treatment, covering all his accommodation expenses. Riki wants to find Claire and express his gratitude, but a man approaches him and informs Riki that the Claymore are waiting for him in the forest. However, upon arriving, Riki realizes that the Claymore in the forest is not the girl he knows. So the Yoma ate the brain of a Claymore, which allowed it to disguise itself as a Claymore. At a critical moment, Claire suddenly appears, and her mission this time is to eliminate this Yoma. However, the Yoma uses Riki as a hostage, forcing Claire to drop her weapon. In order to save Riki, Claire reluctantly abandons her weapon, and the Yoma immediately attacks, impaling Claire's abdomen with his arm. Claire retaliates by throwing the Yoma off the cliff and seizes the opportunity to retrieve her weapon. She releases her Yoma power once again, her golden irises reappearing. With a swift strike, she beheads the Yoma. At the same time, her wound begins to heal. To prevent Riki from blaming himself, Claire explains that she didn't abandon her weapon just to save him. She did it to eliminate the Yoma as quickly as possible. Despite her words, Riki sincerely expresses his gratitude to her. Seeing Riki abandoned by the village, Claire recalls her own painful childhood experiences. Determined to protect him, she decides to take Riki with her on her journey until they find a village where he can settle down. Claymore, who's out on a mission, is scrutinized by the organization every once in a while. This time, black-clad individuals arrived with a new supply for Claire and delivered a black letter. The letter signifies that another Claymore is about to awaken as a Yoma. The next day, Claire sets off with Riki for their destination. After settling Riki in a human town, she ventures out alone to find the Claymore, who is on the verge of transforming into a Yoma. Meanwhile, at an inn, Raki coincidentally encounters one of the black-clad individuals from the Claymore organization. The man revealed to Raki that the Claymore were originally human beings, those who became half-human, half-Yoma beings by infusing Yoma flesh and blood into themselves. This transformation grants them tremendous power. They were created by an enigmatic organization as a weapon against Yoma. Only women can undergo the experiment to become these hybrid beings. They must suppress the Yoma power within them with their human will. Each time a Claymore uses her power, the balance within her body tilts slightly towards the Yoma side. Ultimately, the fate of a Claymore is to become a Yoma. Before they completely lose consciousness and become Yoma, the organization eliminates them. The black letter is the organization's final right bestowed upon the Claymore about to transform into a Yoma, to be able to invite a specific person to carry out the execution, and the black letter Claire received was from her best friend, Raki. Afraid that Claire might also become a Yoma, hastily catches up to her. Fianna, who is on the verge of transforming into a Yoma, senses Claire's arrival. In order to have a dignified meeting with Claire, Fianna forcefully suppresses the Yoma power inside her and reverts to her human appearance. Both of them are abandoned by humans and have relied on each other for survival until now. However, Fianna, who was relatively weak inside, ultimately succumbed to the Yoma within her. Although Raki wants to stop her, Claire ultimately kills her closest friend with her own hands. If Claire didn't kill her at this moment, Fianna would have turned into a mindless Yoma. It is better to let her die with dignity. Since the day they became Claymore, their destinies were already sealed. They spend their days fighting and battling Yoma, either being killed by them or, in the end, being eliminated by their comrades after turning into Yoma. Every person who becomes a Claymore cannot escape this tragic end. On the other side, a Yoma attack occurs within a church. In order to survive, the priest Wad is forced to break the rules and seek help from a half-human, half-Yoma Claymore. However, being the sacred capital and one of the most important cities in the country, suspicious individuals are not allowed to enter, let alone a half-human, half-Yoma Claymore. To blend into the city, Claire consumes a small pill that suppresses her Yoma power. Her pupils regain their normal human color, but this also causes her to lose her ability to detect Yoma. The next day, Claire and Raki disguise themselves as siblings and successfully enter the city. After settling their belongings, they head to the grand hall where the incident took place. At the entrance of the church, there is a mysterious mummified figure on display, seemingly the remains of a once great person. However, with her Yoma power suppressed, Claire cannot sense any Yoma aura within the church. To avoid drawing attention, the priest Wad and Claire arrange to meet later in the evening. Worried about Raki's safety, Claire silently sneaks into the church alone. Wad is already waiting for her and proceeds to inform her about the information regarding the victims within the city. However, while Claire searches for the Yoma, she is spotted by patrolling soldiers who immediately launch an attack on her. Ordinary humans are no match for her, and Claire quickly evades the soldiers' pursuit. Shortly after she leaves, another Yoma attack occurs within the church. The next day, the soldiers come to search the inn, suspecting Claire to be the legendary Claymore. However, Claire has already taken the pill again. When the soldiers examine her eyes, her pupils return to their normal state. The soldiers found nothing unusual, so they turned away. Claire returns to the church to investigate the situation of the deceased. She suspects that the Yoma responsible for the attacks is an aberrant feeder, a Yoma that has lived for a long time. These types of Yoma not only have an insatiable appetite but also become cunning and sly in their behavior. Moreover, this particular Yoma always commits its crimes within the church, indicating that it may have disguised itself as a member of the church. During the night, Claire goes out again to search for the Yoma. However, the two soldiers from the previous night once again have their eyes on her. As soon as they see Claire's silver pupils, they immediately launch an attack. Just as the two sides engage in a fierce battle, screams echo from the church once more. Claire rushes inside without hesitation. The Yoma, hiding in the darkness, immediately attacks Claire. In order to protect the two soldiers, Claire sustains a deep gash across her abdomen. Despite her severe injuries, she continues to fight the Yoma. The soldiers attempt to come to her aid but are no match for the Yoma. Instead, they become burdens to Claire. To protect the soldiers, Claire is pierced by the Yoma's claws. Fortunately, the patrolling soldiers arrive just in time to support her and drive the Yoma away. Claire's selfless actions leave her severely injured and in a state of unconsciousness. However, her bravery earns the trust of the two soldiers. After 3 days and nights of being unconscious, Claire finally awakens. In order to expose the true identity of the Yoma within the church, Claire presents her plan to Wad. The plan involves gathering all the personnel of the church together. She will no longer take the Yoma-suppressing pills and instead reveal her Claymore identity. Utilizing the power of her silver pupils, she will identify the Yoma and thoroughly investigate everyone within the church. The church's personnel express their dissatisfaction with the plan, but with the assistance of the soldiers, they are powerless to resist. Claire proceeds to individually inspect each person, including even the highest authority of the church, the Pope, treating everyone equally, and Raki, carrying a statue, waits at the entrance. Claire, in order to conceal her identity as a Claymore, has her most important weapon hidden inside the statue. At this point, Claire's investigation only has Wad left. Everyone is on edge, ready to make a move against Wad, but to Claire's shock, Wad is not the incarnation of a Yoma. Everyone has passed Claire's inspection. She must have overlooked something to have missed the presence of the Yoma. What Claire didn't realize, the Yoma chose to hide its true form. Wasn't anyone in the church. It was the mummy at the front door of the church. This allowed it to cleverly evade all the checks. Raki, standing guard at the entrance, is completely unaware of the approaching danger. But with his wounds still fresh, Claire was no match for the Yoma. Fortunately, the two soldiers joined the battle, relieving some of the pressure on Claire. Seeing the urgency of the situation, Raki immediately throws the statue to Claire. After the statue takes the Yoma's attack, it shatters, revealing the Claymore inside. With her weapon in hand, Claire's aura increases. She quickly cuts off one of the Yoma's arms. However, her body's wounds also reopen, causing blood to flow continuously. Seizing this opportunity, the Yoma knocks Claire to the ground. The tide of the battle immediately turns. The two soldiers immediately charged forward. They realized that they were no match for the Yoma, but they want to become Claire's shield. They are willing to sacrifice themselves if it means slaying the Yoma and protecting the city. The two soldiers use their bodies to hold back the Yoma's attacks. Claire seizes the opportunity and leaps up. Then, she ruthlessly cleaves the Yoma's body. However, she does not hit the Yoma's vital spot. She forcibly taps into the Yoma's power within her. Claire's pupils instantly turn golden. Then she swung her sword down. The core of the Yoma's head is directly cleaved, shattering it. Finally, the malevolent Yoma is successfully dealt with. However, Claire's condition becomes increasingly abnormal. After forcefully using the Yoma's power while heavily injured, she is unable to revert to her human form. Raki knows that this is a sign of Claire's imminent transformation into a Yoma, but he didn't expect it to happen so suddenly. At this moment, Claire doesn't have time to reach for the black letter and find comrades to kill her. So, she asked the tall soldier to end her life. Otherwise, after she transforms into a Yoma, everyone present would die. Just then, Raki suddenly throws himself onto Claire. Having lost his loved ones, he sees Claire as his only family. If Claire dies, he would pass away with Claire. Raki's words deeply touched Claire, who was about to become a Yoma. Claire finally forcefully suppresses the Yoma's power within her and reverts back to her human form. The next day, the two set off toward their next destination. Before they leave, the older soldier also gives Raki a weapon, hoping he can protect his beloved big sister Claire. She is the world's strongest swordsman. Other Claymores have to give their all to battle against the Yoma, but she doesn't even need to unleash her Yoma power. She effortlessly defeats Yoma with her human body alone. She is Teresa, the strongest Claymore warrior created by the organization. Since her days of hunting Yoma, she has never used her Yoma power once. Thus, her face never distorts into the visage of a Yoma. That's why people call her Teresa the Smiling. As soon as she arrives in a city on a mission, she immediately identifies the Yoma disguised as humans. Without hesitation, she unsheathes her sword and attacks. She doesn't pay attention to people's fear. Before the Yoma can even release its Yoma power to resist, Teresa swiftly cuts them down one after another. In just a few seconds, the 6 fearsome Yoma that people dread are all slain by Teresa. But Teresa knows that there is still one Yoma hidden among the crowd. With a flash of her silver irises, she successfully kills the last remaining Yoma. This is the strength of the strongest Claymore. 7 Yoma didn't even have time to react before they were all killed by her. However, The gaze of the girl she saved at the end stirs something in Teresa's heart. The next day, the little girl was after Teresa, wanted to go with her on her journey. The villagers tell Teresa that the girl is not from this town because she cannot speak. They don't know the specifics, but she was brought here by the Yoma who transformed into a human. Her body is covered in scars. It seems the girl was used as a plaything by the Yoma, experiencing long-term abuse. Teresa knows that the girl sees herself as a savior, but she couldn't possibly feel compassion for a girl. However, shortly after Teresa leaves, the girl, with her unwavering determination, she manages to catch up with Teresa, regardless of Teresa's threats. The girl remains unfazed. Just then, Teresa suddenly senses a strong hostility. Upon closer inspection, she realizes it's a human robber. No wonder she didn't sense any Yoma aura, just as the robber planned to launch a surprise attack from behind. Teresa cuts off his arm. However, the Claymore organization strictly prohibits killing humans, no matter the reason. If a Claymore kills a human, they will be hunted down by the entire organization and eventually killed by their comrades. The robber gang who learned about this finally ceases to fear Teresa. Seeing the well-endowed Teresa, several men simultaneously harbor wicked thoughts. Upon discovering the robber's intentions, Teresa mocks them with a smile. If that was their only purpose, she wouldn't have resisted from the start. Then, she removes her armor, revealing the disgusting fusion of Yoma flesh beneath her clothes. As long as the thieves can accept it, she won't resist. However, the robbers were disgusted, and they quickly retreat from the scene. Teresa didn't expect that, after that incident, that the little girl would haunt her. In order to get rid of the girl, she leaped off a cliff several tens of meters high, but the girl fearlessly jumped down with her. Fortunately, there were branches to cushion her fall. After much consideration, Teresa decided to take her to the next town. The girl obediently followed Teresa's words, seeming afraid of being abandoned again. As a Claymore, Teresa's body has been modified and doesn't require much food, but she still prepares food for the girl every day. And so, the two of them embarked on a journey together. Watching the girl relying on her, Teresa failed to notice that the gears of fate had already begun to turn. Teresa gave the girl a name, calling her Claire. It was the name of one of the beautiful and pure twin goddesses. The other goddess's name was Teresa. Unaware of what awaited them in the next town, they continued their journey. Meanwhile, the robber whose arm Teresa had severed, seeking revenge, had been secretly following them all along. Teresa naturally sensed the presence of the robber, but as a Claymore, she couldn't kill a human. Moreover, she didn't want Claire to witness the darkness of adults while Claire was asleep. Teresa took the initiative to find the tracking robber. The man was filled with rage at the moment, wishing to tear Teresa apart. However, Teresa told him that even if there were rules governing her actions, if he truly tried to kill her, she would fight back to protect herself. The man knew Teresa wouldn't just sit there and wait, and he wouldn't kill Teresa either. He's going to humiliate her, crush her pride and self-esteem. At a critical moment, Claire picked up a stone and threw it at the robber. This completely enraged the man, and he immediately began punching and kicking Claire. Then, he attempted to kill Claire. Teresa finally drew her weapon. She told him that if he didn't leave immediately, even if she was hunted down by the organization, she would kill him. Terrified by Teresa's killing intent, the robber turned and fled. After being saved, Claire threw herself into Teresa's arms. She cried and said to Teresa, "Doesn't it hurt for you at all?" From the beginning, she could sense the pain in Teresa's eyes. She wasn't following Teresa because she saved her, but because she wanted to accompany this Claymore warrior, who wore a smile on her face but harbored immense pain inside. Because of Claire's tragic fate, she could feel the agony in Teresa's heart. From that moment on, Teresa's icy heart seemed to slowly melt. The next day, Teresa brought Claire to a new town. After driving away the Yoma in the town, she asked the residents to take care of Claire. She wanted Claire to return to a normal human life. If she continued to follow Teresa, she might be killed by Yoma at any time. However, shortly after Teresa left, she saw the group of robbers she had encountered before ran straight to the town. At that moment, Teresa finally realized what was happening. The group of robbers had planned from the beginning to target this remote small town. However, they didn't dare to act recklessly due to the presence of Yoma in the town. When they learned that Teresa had eliminated the Yoma, they immediately began their operation. When Teresa rushed back to the town, it had already turned into a human hell. Teresa anxiously searched for Claire's whereabouts, Seeing Teresa's arrival, the robbers continued their ruthless burning, killing, and looting. They knew that Claymores wouldn't kill them, and Teresa had no intention of interfering with their actions, until she saw a dying Claire being dragged by the robber whose hand she'd cut off. Teresa's face showed anger for the first time. She instantly decapitated the person. Teresa looked at these humans who were even more disgusting than demons, and she couldn't bear it anymore. Everyone realized Teresa's terror, but it was already too late. Dozens of robbers died consecutively under Teresa's sword. At that moment, an envoy from the Claymore organization witnessed everything. No one could violate the rules they had set. They quickly sent 5 Claymores to hunt down Teresa. At this point, Teresa had no intention of fighting back. Her final wish was only to know how they would deal with Claire, but the man in black didn't tell her because he didn't want to waste time talking to someone who was about to die. However, Teresa couldn't bear to leave Claire behind at the last moment. With a single strike, she incapacitated the 5 Claymores.
やっぱりまだ死ねないや。
For Teresa at that moment, Claire was her only reason to survive. From that point on, she would betray the organization and live for Claire. The defection of the strongest Claymore made the organization lose face. To eliminate Teresa, the organization decided to send the 2nd through 5th most powerful Claymores: Noel, the 5th ranked Claymore; Sophia, the 4th ranked Claymore; Elena, the 3rd ranked Claymore; and newcomer Priscilla, who just moved up to 2nd place. In just a few months, she had risen from a novice to the 2nd-ranked position. Although she was just a little girl, no one dared to underestimate her formidable strength. And just like Teresa, her strength lay in the fact that she could destroy all the Yoma she had encountered so far without releasing her Yoma power. On the other side, after Teresa had driven away the Yoma in the town, she decided to temporarily settle down. She wanted Claire to rest and recover her strength. However, it didn't take long for the pursuers to track Teresa's aura and find her. They made their way straight to Teresa's room, but little did they know that Teresa had been waiting for them. Elena, in particular, was confident in her high-speed swordsmanship. What Elena didn't anticipate was that her proud high-speed swordsmanship would be effortlessly neutralized by Teresa. Soon, the others joined in the assault, but Teresa skillfully neutralized each of their attacks. At that moment, Priscilla had already arrived behind Teresa. She had no intention of launching a sneak attack, but as someone who had been brainwashed by the organization for a long time, she prioritized the organization's rules above all else. In her eyes, Teresa, who had violated those rules, was unforgivable. Although young, Priscilla possessed formidable strength. In their first encounter, she fought Teresa on equal footing. However, only Elena, who had once held the 2nd rank, knew the true reason why Teresa had maintained her top rank for so long. It was because her ability to manipulate the Yoma energy within her body was unrivaled. As for the newly promoted 2nd-ranked Priscilla, she could also harness the power of Yoma energy to the extreme. However, even so, she gradually found herself falling behind in the battle. Priscilla was still too inexperienced. Given enough time, she might surpass Teresa in the future. The other 3 Claymores no longer stood by as spectators. They decided to join forces and eliminate Teresa. However, after a brief exchange, Teresa remained unscathed while they all sustained injuries. They realized that if they continued, they would all end up dead by Teresa's sword. With that realization, they made the decision to unleash the full power of their Yoma energy. Whether it was speed or strength, they experienced a qualitative enhancement, but Teresa was still able to handle their attacks with ease. While Teresa dodged the attacks, she managed to seriously injure Elena, who was the most experienced. Elena finally understood that they had all underestimated Teresa's true power. Even when the 4 of them joined forces, Teresa hadn't even exerted her full strength. Soon enough, all 4 Claymores lay defeated on the ground, and Teresa stood before Priscilla. She knew that if she let this talented girl grow up, she will undoubtedly become her most formidable rival in the future. Therefore, Teresa contemplated eliminating the threat once and for all. At this moment, Priscilla was left with nothing but fear. The strength and self-respect she was so proud of, it was destroyed by Teresa. However, Teresa ultimately chose not to kill her. She didn't want Claire, who was still a child, to witness such a scene. As the strongest of them all, she shouldn't be intimidated by such a future prospect. With that in mind, she took Claire and left the town behind. At that moment, the injured individuals quickly utilized their Yoma power to heal their wounds. However, Priscilla, on the other hand, lowered her head and began to cry. Not only had she suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of a renegade against the organization, but she had also been spared by her enemy. Overwhelmed by a strong sense of humiliation, Priscilla could no longer suppress the Yoma power within her. As a result, a massive release of Yoma energy surged from her body, distorting her face. Priscilla once again launched an assault on Teresa. Elena knew that Priscilla had been driven to madness by anger, forcefully releasing the Yoma power within her. Teresa remained calm in the face of Priscilla's pursuit. Even if Priscilla unleashed her Yoma power, she could never match Teresa. As a half-human, half-Yoma Claymore warrior, when they release 10% of their Yoma power, their pupils turn golden. If they release 30%, their face will contort into an ugly appearance. However, once they reach 80%, the Claymore will completely transform into a Yoma. Teresa sensed that Priscilla's Yoma power had currently reached a 70% release. Nevertheless, Teresa still didn't see her as a threat. However, Priscilla's consciousness began to blur, and she continued to release the Yoma power within her. Teresa realized that she couldn't let her continue on this path. She made the decision to release her own Yoma power for the first time. As her pupils turned golden, Teresa's strength greatly increased. The two colossal forces clashed in the valley. Elena finally understood the terrifying extent of Teresa's power. Compared to Priscilla, who risked becoming a Yoma, Teresa had only released her Yoma power enough to change her pupils. Soon, Priscilla was repeatedly struck by Teresa. Unable to retaliate, Teresa didn't want to kill Priscilla. She wanted her to immediately suppress her Yoma energy and return to being human. However, Priscilla released all of the Yoma power within her in an attempt to defeat Teresa. Now she could no longer revert to her human form. Priscilla regretted her actions. She pleaded with Teresa to help her regain her humanity, but Teresa was powerless to do so. The only thing she could do was to kill Priscilla before she fully transformed into a Yoma. But suddenly, Priscilla attacked and decapitated Teresa with a single blow. Subsequently, Priscilla's body underwent a grotesque transformation. Swelling up into the form of a Yoma, she became an awakened being, one of the most terrifying creatures among the Yoma. Priscilla had completely lost her humanity and, as a Yoma, her heart was consumed by nothing but the desire to kill. Elena and the others immediately started to surround and attack Priscilla. But within a matter of seconds, the three top-ranked Claymore warriors met a gruesome end at Priscilla's hands. However, Priscilla showed no interest in the weak human Claire, not even sparing her a glance. With that, Priscilla arrogantly departed from the scene, leaving Claire to cradle Teresa's severed head and cry out in anguish. A few days later, Claire was subjected to experiments arranged by the Claymore organization. After being infused with Teresa's flesh and blood, Claire became a Claymore warrior herself.